Jacksonville veterans report for training camp on July 25th at Florida Blue Health Wellness Practice Fields as the Jags prepare for an encore playoff season. We'll find out if they're ready to get a step further ahead in 2018 as we preview training camp for the Jacksonville Jaguars by going one-on-one with Mike Kay, Jags beat writer for First Coast News in Jacksonville, on the OFN Meeting Room with Greg DePalma. All right, it's Monday, June 25th, 2018. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning into the OFN Meeting Room as we preview NFL training camps for the 2018 season. And we continue to do that this season. Actually, this is only our second so far. We had one earlier today with Tampa Bay analyst David Harrison. So doing a little bit of a Florida two-step here to get things started for the 2018 training camp season. And we're going to do it here on this particular show with First Coast News Jags beat writer Mike Kay. Mike, thanks for helping us talk Jacksonville Jaguars football today.
Sure, thanks for having me.
All right, Mike. So must have been fun last year. First playoff appearance since 2007, first championship game appearance since 1999. But now a completely different situation going to training camp this year with so many expectations. Of course, a lot more confidence. But as I said in that open, you got to have an encore. And the encore for the fans, you would think they're going to be hungry for a lot more after what happened and how close the team came from reaching the Super Bowl last year.
Well, I think the expectations are high amongst the fan base and the roster. The team thinks that they're in a place to win and repeat what they did last year, if not improve upon it. And I think when you look at what they did in free agency, they made a lot of calculated short-term risk moves because they know eventually they're going to pay Jalen Ramsey, Miles Jack, Yannick Ngakoue, what have you. And I think they did right by the team long-term by bringing in guys like Dante Moncrief on a one-year contract, Austin Seferian-Jenkins on a two-year contract, really getting the safety unit a little bit better. I think they're going to be in a position to long-term contend in the AFC South.
Yeah, let's talk about the offense because the offense was much better than people thought, especially with the issues at quarterback coming into the season. And you look at they went 6th overall offensively, but that was really mostly because of that first-ranked rushing offense with Fournette leading the way. So we know, what kind of a talent he is. But T.J. Yeldon also seemed to be a better player for the team as a number 2 guy. And then also Corey Grant seemed to do a pretty good job too. Is that the reason why the Jags feel comfortable that even though Ivory's gone, that if something were to happen to Fournette or, misses a game or two, that Yeldon and Grant can do the job?
Well, I think when you look at Yeldon, he's the ideal third down back. He's a really good blocker in the backfield. He's really good at catching the ball out of the backfield. And then you have Corey Grant, who's a guy who's shined every time he's gotten an opportunity. Granted, the opportunities have been limited.
Sure.
But he is a guy that has a lot of tools that make him different than both Yeldon and Fournette. And I think the one concern that I have is if Fournette goes down, how are you winning games based on the way this offense is set up with a guy like Corey Grant, with a guy like DJ Yeldon?
Well, what do you think is their response to that? Have they had that question posed to them? And even if they did, I'm sure the response is, well, we've got the guys. We're confident that Yeldon and Grant will do the job. But do you think this is it? Do you think they go after another running back at some point, maybe bring in a veteran?
Well, I think the benefit of running back being a potential position of need is that they'll have their opportunity on the waiver wire. They'll be able to look for veterans. Guys get cut. I thought C.J. Anderson made a lot of sense, but clearly they have a lot of confidence in the guys they have right now, Corey Grant, T.J. Yeldon. They must like Tim Cook a lot because he's the most comparable body type to a Leonard Fournette.
Okay, interesting. And what's his background?
He was a fullback/running back at Oregon State 2 years ago. Last year, he came in as an undrafted rookie, got injured while he was on the practice squad, and spent the entire year on the practice squad injured reserve. So he's now coming back after having a full off season, because last year he had to deal with the graduation rules of being on the West Coast. This year he gets a full off season and he knows the offense.
Yeah, looking at I looked at Grant's stats a few months ago, and I was surprised. But look, 8.3 yards a carry. So
with that, remember 2 of his big runs that were over 45 yards from state punt. So a little misleading.
Yeah,
but yeah, he's got some pep in his step,
and he helps in the receiving game as well. But more importantly, he's going to help as far as a kick returner. So because T.J. Yeldon is definitely the top receiver in the unit, and he had a good season too, averaging 5.2 yards per carry. So anyway, that's the look of the running back position. Let's go to quarterback and talk about this. Me as a Jet fan, I heard somebody throw out, well, would the Jets, I don't remember where I heard it, but, would the Jets and the Jags be an interesting trade possibility during the preseason? If the Jets wanted to trade Teddy Bridgewater, and with the Jags situation with Dante Fowler possibly not returning after this year, would that be a good trade situation? If not Fowler, would there be somebody else? Do you think that the Jags would possibly, not necessarily just Bridgewater, but do you think that they would be looking to add a backup at quarterback, or are they comfortable with the 2 new guys, Kessler and the rookie Tanner Lee?
It seems like they're pretty comfortable with Kessler. Tanner Lee hasn't played all that well didn't play all that well during the offseason program. Kessler's cheap. He's on a 3rd-round pick contract. You don't have to sign a veteran who would. Their minimum would typically be above the 3rd-round pick money on the street. And then he's just a perfect fit for the West Coast offense. So I think for right now they're comfortable with Kessler. If he falters in training camp or the preseason, maybe they look into somebody like Matt Moore, who's still a free agent. But as far as the Bridgewater trade, I wrote about this yesterday. That doesn't make a lot of sense for them. Teddy was a free agent at one point. They showed no interest.
Okay.
And honestly, Fowler's a guy who played in 19 games last year, including the postseason, produced 10 sacks. Yeah, sure, he's going to be a free agent next year, but while they have him and they're trying to make this Super Bowl run, it makes sense to have a guy who's on a contract year who can rotate in and he's going to put his best foot forward.
No, absolutely. No question about that. And I really think it probably would have to mean maybe a Blake Bortles injury or something.
Correct.
Because Bortles, look, he had a career-high completion percentage, career low in interceptions. You could look, they didn't make the championship game and almost get to the Super Bowl on all defense and running game. Bortles had to do something in the passing game, and he did. I mean, sure, he's not a glamorous type. He may never live up to that draft status, but with this team on defense and the running game and the way they've, and even the offensive line, they just need Blake Bortles to do a decent job, limit the mistakes, and last season was promising at some point.
Yeah, certainly, and I thought he looked very good during the offseason program. He was hitting guys in stride. He was accurate. He looked comfortable back there. He's been really working on his throwing motion continuously. That was the problem with the year before, is that he had worked on throwing motion entering his second season and then looked pretty good. Then he skipped out on doing it the season after, and season 3 was bad. So I think with him keeping up appearances at his at the training facility in California with his QB gurus, and the fact that he is more comfortable as a winner on this team, I think you'll see Blake Bortles have a pretty decent performance this year.
Yeah, I think what really got to people, especially outside the Jacksonville area, was just like what we saw in the playoffs, where you had the Buffalo game, and then you had the Pittsburgh game, and you were like, what is going on here? I mean, you couldn't figure things out with him from week to week sometimes.
Well, and I think it's pretty comparable to a Nick Foles, who had a really good game against the Giants, then was awful against the Raiders and the Cowboys, and pretty mediocre against the Falcons, and then had 2 of the best games of his career against the Vikings and the Patriots during the playoffs. So
Yep.
I think that's a commonality amongst young quarterbacks who aren't necessarily top-level guys. I mean, you saw Jay Cutler used to do it on a week in and week out basis. We don't know what Jay Cutler we're going to get. For a while, Stafford was the same way. Matt Ryan, Joe Flacco, they've all had those, spurts in their career as well.
Okay, let's go to receivers, and we'll start first of all at tight end. They bring in Austin Seferian-Jenkins and Niles Paul. Jenkins is the big catch. Mercedes Lewis is gone finally, but Jenkins, again, me being a Jet fan, they just haven't had the tight end situation was so bad for so long that anything that Jenkins gave him, which was seen upon like a Pro Bowl status, but when you looked closer at it, he was okay. I mean, he did a good job. I think what was the most encouraging thing was he kind of got rid of some of the off-the-field demons, and that was also what kind of brought him down in Tampa. So now he's on a winning organization, and which would be better for him. So I think this is no doubt, I think it's a good move for the Jags. I don't expect him to all of a sudden become the player that some people thought he could become when he was drafted. But what do you think about him as do you think it'll be an upgrade from where the team had been the last couple of years? Is that what they're expecting?
Yeah, I think the expectation is he'll be an upgrade as a receiving threat over the likes of Mercedes Lewis and Ben Koyak. That said, he looked fantastic during the offseason program, really blew me away. He and Bortles have already developed a pretty strong chemistry, and I think he's a guy that could have a career year in this offense because it looks like Nathaniel Hackett can finally use the tight end position the way he wants to.
All right, and as far as Paul, is Paul combination going to be used as number 2 and also on special teams, kind of help there in that department?
Well, special teams will be his main, force of play, but I think he's competing right now with James O'Shaughnessy to be that number 2 guy. It's going to be a tight competition. We'll see what happens. All
right, offensive line, the team did a much better job last year, which was a big reason for the success. But overall, there's still some improvement needed in several spots. And Andrew Norwell is a major upgrade. That is going to be huge for the offensive line. I still myself have reservations about Cam Robinson. I need to see some improvement there, especially from the left tackle spot. And then tell me what they're thinking about on the right side, especially with A.J. Cann and Will Richardson, the rookie, get a chance to start?
So from the Cam Robinson perspective, you also have to factor in what he was given entering his rookie year, right? So he was initially going to be the swing tackle with Brandon Albert starting at left tackle. They moved him. Albert retired, did all this dumb stuff during the offseason, went back and forth, was eventually released. And then Cam Robinson stepped in. This is a makeshift offensive line for the most part. They kept moving in and out of pieces during training camp, and a unit finally stuck. They had so many injuries across that offensive line throughout the season that he never was able to get a comfortable timing with the rest of the 4 guys. But I do think he'll improve. That's the expectation. As far as the right side of the line, A.J. Cann should be considered the favorite to start at right guard with competition like Josh Walker and Tyler Shatley, both of whom have been given opportunities in the past. Both have been around the league in the past, but none of them have the athletic upside of A.J. Cann. A.J. Cann's in the final year of his contract, and the theory is, much like Dante Fowler, that he'll play the best football that he can so that he can cash in during free agency. At right tackle, Jeremy Parnell will continue to man right tackle.
Okay.
I look for Will Richardson to be the swing tackle. He's never played guard before in his career, and to move a rookie 4th-round pick from right tackle to right guard when you already have a veteran in place who started for 3 years, it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
And the knock on Richardson was his off-the-field issues. Good prospect,
Correct.
But off-the-field issues, red flags there. He's had some injuries as well. So what's going on as far as how he's been able to handle himself to this point?
So far, so good. It seems like he's really willing to learn and really willing to find a role, even if it's not in the starting lineup. So I think he's a guy that's coming in with a great attitude, and we'll hopefully see him play at some point this season.
All right, let's take a look at wide receiver. A lot of movement here. Allen Robinson, who was injured last year, he's gone. Alan Hearns is gone. You bring in Moncrief. You draft DJ Shark. And the guy that I just was shocked was not drafted was Alan Lazard. I don't understand how that guy doesn't get drafted. But that's a bonus for the Jags to be able to get a player of his caliber without even having to use up a draft pick. So it is incredible how much depth the Jacksonville receiver core has now compared to just a couple years ago.
Yeah, they're majoring in guys that have a lot of speed. Allen Robinson was a guy who could go up and get the ball, but he wasn't a guy that stretched the field. Same with Alan Hearns. Marquise Lee is a guy who can do a lot of underneath stuff, take the attention of double coverage. Dante Moncrief, when healthy, is a speed demon. Chark's got great speed, and he's shown off his size, actually, during the offseason program. J.D. Westbrook and Keelan Cole can both burn as well. Lazard, I was surprised, went undrafted as well, but he hasn't had the best off-season program. He dropped a couple of passes and wasn't really targeted all that often. Chark's the guy that's really impressed me. I think he's the future number one wide receiver on this team. His catching radius is insane. He's made tons of highlight catches throughout the offseason, and he's just really finding his way in the offense.
I actually think Chark could end up the best receiver in this class. I was shocked that he wasn't. I mean, look, second round, still a good pick. But I just felt that you're talking about a guy that with good size, great speed, good playmaker, and he was brought down by the quarterback situation at LSU, which shouldn't have bothered the scouts. So I was kind of surprised, but hey, still second round, and he has an opportunity to maybe be the number one guy in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that only had 2 years of production at LSU. Like you said, I mean, every LSU wide receiver has dealt with the shortcomings of an LSU quarterback during his career. I like Chark's attitude. He's come in very mature. And, he's, like I said, he's making plays. He's formed a really good chemistry with Cody Kessler. That's the one reason to have some belief in Cody Kessler, who we talked about before, is the connection between them has been very, very, very strong.
Yeah, I like Kessler. I think Kessler is going to stick around the NFL for a long time. Maybe never going to be a starter, but could end up as a very good number two, and you never know. He had a really good college career, so I think that's a good pickup for the Jags. Let's go over to defense and defensive line. You take a look at this is really where it started on defense for this team last year. Second in defense, first against the pass, and you look at the pass rush capability. We talked about Fowler already. They brought in Darius early last season. Ngakoue was a revelation, and then they add in Brian in the draft. So talk about the new guys, especially Brian.
So Brian's playing both strong side end, which is a 5 to 6 technique hybrid role that Calais Campbell started at last year, but Calais Campbell also rotates, which is what Taven Bryan's been pegged to do. He's also getting snaps at 3 technique as well, which I think is more of his natural position. Obviously, he played it in college. Then you look at what they've got in Ngakoue and Malik Jackson and Marcel Darius and Calais Campbell and Avery Jones. All these guys can do multiple things. Marion Hobby, the defensive line coach, preaches versatility when he looks for new talent. You look at a guy like DeJuan Smoot, who had a lot of pressures last year but didn't really get to the quarterback. They're hoping he is able to take the next step as well. Brian being on the roster has kind of pushed him back a little bit. But overall, I think this group is as strong as a defensive line gets.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Any chance for a guy like Hunter Dimmick to make the team?
It would be a very, very surprising. I mean, there'd have to be injuries. That said, though, he did train as the backup fullback on the practice squad all of last season. So maybe, they only have one fullback on the roster right now, Tommy Bohannon. So maybe he makes the roster that way.
All right. So everybody's got their role. I guess, as you mentioned, Smoot and Brian, those are the guys to keep an eye on as far as guys that need to step it up for playing time. Let's talk about the linebacking unit, and Telvin Smith and Miles Jack are back. But with Posluszny gone, Blair Brown steps into the middle linebacker role. They also drafted Leon Jacobs. So how's Brown looking, and how confident are the Jags that he's going to be able to do the job?
So Brown's actually going to play strong side linebacker. Miles Jack's going to move into the middle.
Okay.
So Brown is competing with rookie Leon Jacobs and former undrafted free agent and small school safety Donald Payne for that strong side job. Miles Jack was out with an undisclosed injury for most of the offseason program, and Payne started in his place.
Okay.
At middle linebacker, picked off Blake Bortles twice during that time. He's kind of raised some eyebrows. Browns looked okay. His height deficiency is clear when he's covering tight ends. We'll see how he does moving forward, but that's probably the one starting job that is completely up in flux at this point.
All right. And does Leon Jacobs have an opportunity to get snaps?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely on special teams, but I think he's the dark horse for the strong side linebacker job.
All right. In the secondary, Ramsey, Boye, Church, Gibson. So that's really strong. Colvin's gone, though. There's the starting slot corner coming off a strong season. They bring in DJ Hayden, and they also draft safety Ronnie Harrison. And actually a couple of guys that were interesting free agents, Quentin Meeks and Dee Delaney in the secondary. But talk about Hayden replacing Colvin and Ronnie Harrison.
So I would say with Hayden, they're looking at him as a guy who can play a lot of man-to-man coverage. They like him in man-to-man. He's still got to learn from a zone perspective. But they also have Tyler Patman, who was around last year, who could serve in that kind of zone role if Hayden does not take to coverage and zone coverage.
Okay.
I also like Hayden as a potential number one backup to Ramsey and Boye as well. I think he strengthens them in that aspect. When you talk about Meeks and Delaney, neither one of them truly stood out during the offseason program, but there are high expectations for both guys. I think Dee Delaney is, again, another dark horse to make the roster. When you look at Ronnie Harrison, it's interesting because they brought in Cody Davis, who a lot of people pegged as just a special teams player, but he was excellent at free safety during the offseason program, and he surprised a lot of the Jaguars coaching staff with a lot of members on the Jaguars coaching staff with his athletic ability. So I look for him to be the backup free safety and for Harrison to be the backup strong safety. Barry Church of the secondary is probably the weakest link. Now, that's not a bad thing when you have Deshaun Gibson, Jalen Ramsey, and A.J. Boye in the backfield with you. But if there was a guy that I would peg for Harrison to get playing time potentially over, it would be Church.
But you would probably have to say then, this is my observation here, looking over what you had last year compared to what you have this year, that the two biggest question marks would be that Posluszny opening at linebacker and losing Colvin.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. I think Posluszny on running downs was important, and his leadership was important, but overall, I think they're going to upgrade from an athletic standpoint regardless of who it is. And then when you look at Colvin, Colvin's the big concern because that position gets targeted so often. And Colvin allowed a lot of catches but limited the damage. He averaged like 6 yards per catch against him, which is really good. So I think if Hayden's able to limit the opportunities of opposing wide receivers in the slot, then we can view this as a successful transition.
As far as special teams, the final draft pick, Logan Cook, he's the guy now, right? Because Nortman didn't punt well at all last season, so replacing him was not a surprise. So this is basically Logan's Cook job as long as he does the good work during camp in the preseason, correct?
Yeah, I was surprised that they didn't bring in another camp leg. They had two punters in for the mandatory mini camp trying out. They didn't end up signing them. Cook is a guy who wasn't all that prolific of a punter in college, and there are some question marks from the outside. That said, they seem to like him quite a bit. He's a good directional punter. Mm-hmm. He's not going to boot the ball down the field probably as consistently as you like. But I think that directional punting mindset is really good for Joe DeCamillis' special teams unit.
And as you mentioned, Cody Davis brought in. We talked about Niles Paul, Don Carey. So an emphasis on special teams this offseason. And of course, Josh Lambo did a really good job last year, 19 of 20, including 2 for 2 from 50. So he had a career year, which was huge for the organization. And what about the kick return game? No. Kick return game seemed to be okay. Nothing, it wasn't terrible. Mickens had a touchdown, but other than that, nothing special. So are we going to see Mickens and Grant once again? Any other players, any other new players that might be able to win those roles?
Well, I believe that Grant will end up being the kick returner. That said, the 6th wide receiver spot will dictate who the starting punter is. If Lazard makes the team, then the punt returner is probably going to be DJ Chark. If Rashad Green wins the punter job, he'll probably be the 6th wide receiver. If Mickens wins the 6th wide receiver job, he'll be the punt returner. So I think it all kind of just depends on who wins the 6th wide receiver job. The first 5 are pretty much locked in stone. If you win the 6th job, chances are you're either the punter or DJ Chark is.
All right, Mike, before I let you go, what is the atmosphere as far as the fans in general, though? Is this because it's something when you haven't had a championship team, which they've never been a championship team, but when you haven't had winning in a long time, the fan base can kind of have a certain kind of an attitude where a certain level of winning is acceptable. But it happened so fast for them last year. So what do you think it's going to be this season? Do you think they're going to be impatient? Do you think they understand this is the beginning of a long run? What's the atmosphere?
Well, I think they realize they have a short-term window with a lot of the really expensive players like Malik Jackson, Calais Campbell, and they want to win now.
Okay.
I think they view the Jaguars' moves as win-now moves. And so I think overall there's a lot of optimism, there's a lot of excitement, and I think there will be throughout the year. I don't think let's say by some chance they lose to the Giants in week 1, I still think the fan base will have a lot of hope.
Yeah. And what about Bortles? What kind of a relationship does he have with the fans?
Well, a lot of people turned down the proposed trade offer that you talked about earlier of trading Teddy Bridgewater for Dante Fowler. So I'd say they're pretty confident in good old Blake.
All right. So, and did they feel that way coming into last season? Were the fans really fed up with Blake coming into the season last season? Or winning cures all, and he's also one of yours, and that helps too when you pick him.
Well, I think there was a level of quiet concern, but I think he was able to kind of answer a lot of questions. The way they want this offense to work, Blake fits in perfectly.
Mike, I appreciate it. Twitter handle is Mike_E_K. That's Kaye. And we look forward to talking to you again once the season starts, Mike. Best of luck this year.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. That is Mike Kaye. And once again, Mike he's got that, I think it's Channel 12, actually, in Jacksonville. First Coast News in Jacksonville. So, boy, I'm telling you, it is a different mindset when you have had so much losing, and just try to remember what it was like last year prior to the Jags championship game season. I mean, the Jags were as bad as you can think of as a franchise. I mean, look, first playoff appearance, it was the first playoff appearance in 10 years. 10 years. And he hadn't been to the championship game. I mean, some kids that were, 15 years old, 16 years old, had never even seen the team get to a championship game before. So it's, but look, it's not a big market, and I think they are going to be very patient there. And I know they're going to lose some players in free agency, but I think as long as they get the quarterback situation straightened out in Jacksonville, then there's going to be a lot of winning there as long as Tom Coughlin's in charge. Okay, I want to thank Mike for joining us here. We'll be back again tomorrow. More training camp coverage on the OFN as we talk Green Bay Packers football with Bill Huber, publisher of PackerReport.com. Don't forget to order a subscription of your choosing, including the 2018 Ourlads NFL Draft Review Guide right here at ourlads.com. Follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. Receive our on-demand media alerts for every OFN show and interview, including this one. And thanks for listening to this edition of the OFN Meeting Room with Greg DePalma on the Ourlads Football Radio Network, where it's never too early to think about the start of the 2018 football season.